It has been said that the world is a stage, and we are the actors. In this analogy, God would be the script. When we find things not going right in our lives, it's because we're not following the script properly. To make life better again, turn back to God. Review history. Review the script and see where you made your mistake. In your review of history, find where you made your error, your sin against God. Words passed down from generation to generation, giving us guidance, and repent, and things will be made better. Welcome, my name is Alan Jackson, and I believe I've discovered some deviations from the script, and these are causing many to die and for all of us to suffer. In 1985, I believe I've discovered the theory of magnetrition, which points out that all warm-blooded animals need to move periodically in the Earth's magnetic field to stay healthy. If I'm correct in my assessment, rather than being esteemed in our society, I am being persecuted for noticing errors in our behavior. And this, in itself, is evidence of a dysfunctioning society. In our history, Jesus is one of the most intelligent persons that ever lived. He studied the script that we had so far and shared with us his interpretation by way of God, the script, through the generations, which makes life easier for us in understanding the script and avoiding misfortune. From the book entitled American Constitutional Law, a record is shared documenting gross violations of the Constitution by political gangs with its members posing as our representatives. In violation of the meaning of the words in the Constitution, those in Congress informed us that it was a law that persons must pay an income tax due to a recent measure they agreed on. Yet, when brought before the Supreme Court, the people of the nation were informed that this was not the case, and that these representatives had violated their oath to uphold the Constitution. In the finding by the Supreme Court, it was stated that there could be but one answer. Are we to believe that those in Congress could not read the Constitution? That the words are so vague that an oath required by law to preserve it is actually meaningless? In hindsight, I think this can all be recognized as a deceptive act to bolster support in an effort to change the Constitution. A change to its detriment, not to its betterment, which would disqualify it as an amendment to the Constitution. But this did happen, and I think we can see the reasons in a dissenting argument. In its dissenting argument, in an effort to change the original intent, original law in the Constitution, the spokesman for change makes some interesting points. Observation. He describes the decision as denying a power to the general government, whereas the original intent was to restrict it to the nation as a whole, this power to go to war. Much of the funding for the general government, which by this action is complaining it's not getting enough, is derived from taxing imports, commerce between nations, which the dissenting argument points out would be diminished during war. This indicates that limiting the general government to imports taxation would be a strong incentive to keep our nation from going to war and behoove the general government toward avoiding wars between other nations, restricting commerce. War profiteers were not unknown to those framing the laws of our land. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, the original Constitution was written.
Secure, in safekeeping or custody. Safe, guarded, unharmed, defended, see protected. Blessing, the gift of divine favor. Approval, sanction, approbation, consent, good wishes, see permission. Liberty, the sum of rights and exemptions possessed in common by the people of a community, state, etc. See also civil liberties, political liberty. The rights supposedly natural to men. Freedom, free speech, suffrage, autonomy, sovereignty, franchise, independence, enfranchisement, freedom from arbitrary government, freedom from despotic government, power of choice, right of habeas corpus, enfranchisement, opportunity, right, immunity, privilege, exemption, birthright, self-government, education, enlightenment, bail, life, self-development, self-determination, autarky. Posterity, all succeeding generations. progeny, descendants, seed, breed, children, issue, heirs, rising generation, new generation, younger generation, successors, lineage, future time.
For there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek. This concept is of the utmost importance, a matter of life and death, peace and war, civilized and uncivilized. Understanding, recognizing as a fact this concept, and sharing it, teaching it, is probably why Jesus is known as the Prince of Peace. There is no difference between peoples. And teaching this is probably why Jesus was crucified, because it would put an end to the prophets of the war profiteers, the corrupt politician that leads you to believe that there is a difference, that the people you kill in the act of war is not your own people. Can you put your faith in the fact that there is no difference between peoples? Can you recognize that it's a fact of reality? If so, then you should also be able to recognize that what the corrupt politician is doing is trying to drive you out of touch with reality, and then directs your insane behavior toward others. If this concept of equality is correct, then the religious cults are out of touch with reality, and their leaders are profiting from it.
Imperative for Zionism, which was made necessary by the Holocaust, was added to after the creation of the State of Israel in 48. That's between 1948 and 1967. There were very many Jewish communities living in various Arab countries around the Middle East, in Baghdad, in Yemen, in Cairo, in Morocco, and many of the Jewish communities in these places had to pick up and flee, either because they were expelled and deprived of their life or property by the governments that were there in the region, or in the case of a handful of places that we know of, like in Baghdad and in Cairo, where Israeli secret intelligence operations were designed specifically to scare those communities into leaving.
Their deeds done in darkness came to light through covert means. They were instigating people against their own cult members in the Middle East. When war breaks out, the Zionists, backed by superpowers, defeat the countries in the Middle East and take their land. Prior to acquiring the State of Israel, this Zionist cult did not have a home base. It was spread throughout the many countries involved in its covert activities, instigating strife between peoples for their profit. Did they actually cause the Holocaust to happen just to justify getting the State of Israel? Where will insanity lead next, if allowed to continue? In repudiation of the basic intent of the Constitution, in 1913, political gangs organized the removal of the very heart of the Constitution, abolishing many safeguards against an abusive general government, robbing the states and the individuals of many of their protective rights, leaving the individual having to deal with a huge bureaucracy on his own. Then began the prohibitions. Politics with a purse began to rule rather than laws. Part of the New Deal offered by the federal government was to bribe farmers not to continue to grow cotton in an effort to increase the price of it. Again, the Supreme Court stated that the representatives had violated their oath and failed to uphold the Constitution in such legislation. The federal government was robbing Peter to pay Paul not to do his job. Was this another favor to the petroleum corporations, like abolishing home distilling? Would this act make synthetic fibers more economically viable? Securing the blessings of liberty depends on our relationship with words, our faith in them, and our understanding of them. It is by our relationship with words that we are given access to history and the future. Through words, the generations of men are given the ability to work together eternally, consciously. Reject not the words in favor of men. People are becoming more and more dangerously ignorant, yet politically correct. 1 Kings 3:19. And this woman's child died in the night because she overlaid it. What does the term overlaid mean? My discovery of having to move in the Earth's magnetic field in order to stay healthy indicates that doctors are causing crib death by taking the babies away from the mothers and laying them in cribs. And this behavior is copied at home. Life or death hinges on the correct interpretation of the word. Yet they're changing the words in the Bible.